Everyone, can you hear me? Excellent. Right, well, I've come at it at a slightly different angle. Got a couple of colleagues. Oh, that's a good start, isn't it? So, I teach in this thing called the Centre for Professional Legal Studies, which is a unit which is responsible for teaching barristers and solicitors. It's been going for about 25 years, and it is literally one of the best in England and Wales. It's a very, very good unit, and I'm lucky to work there. Now, one of the things about being such a good unit is that people up above think, oh yes, what we'll do is we'll get them to do something new. And Panopto was one of the new things that we got. Now, in our typical way, we muttered about it a bit when we got it, and then finally we rolled up our sleeves and we got on with it. Now, actually, you could have had any of my colleagues out here talking about it because we all went through the same experience, but we were essentially thrown in at the deep end. None of us knew what we were doing. Our training, I think, was limited to an hour on here's the button to press on Panopto, but in terms of how you create a lecture for what is often a radio type environment, we didn't have any of that at all. So we've been on this road working out what to do as we go, and that's what I wanted to talk about. Now, we do a number of unusual things. For example, we do a lot of skills training. And when we do skills training, every piece of skills work that a student does is recorded via Panopto, including all of the feedback that the tutor has to give instantaneously on the student's performance. Now, as you can imagine, that requires a high degree of trust in your colleagues, that they're not all going to be sneaking in and watching your performances. But it does work, and actually, when I was teaching on a course and I had a new colleague who came in, she found it very helpful to be able to drop in and watch what I had been doing so that she had something at least to think, well, he does it that way, I want to do it. I want to do it some other way. So there is a kind of fear factor about it because anything that you do potentially could end up on YouTube. Okay, which was a point that was picked up before, and therefore, obviously, when you speak, when you're recording, you are just aware that you are speaking for posterity. Okay, right. So, what do we do? Well, through force of circumstances, partly as a result of pressure on space, and partly because we decided that we wanted to create flexible courses, so we were going to squash them into 3 and 4 days a week, it meant that we didn't have enough time to deliver lectures live. Net result is I don't think any of my lectures are delivered live, which is quite a leap. So I sit in my room speaking to the screen, and I never get to see a human face, and I can't tell whether anybody is bored or has fallen asleep or is on their mobile phone. So for me, it requires a high degree of self-motivation. Yeah, you don't have that instant feedback where you think, oh yes, that point hasn't gone home, I need to go around it again. I can't jump in and ask questions. I can't suddenly have a bright idea and think, oh yes, that's really interesting, let's pursue that, because I don't have questions. Likewise, we can't go off on tangents. So it's a very, very different world. And I suppose, if I had a choice, I would still do live lectures. But I don't have a choice. So this is where we are. So, there you are. You are sat in your room, at your desk, with your PC screen in front of you. You will have, and colleagues will recognise this, a really decent quality desk mic. So that's terrific. So you think, well, I'm just going to sound brilliant. You won't sound as good as you think you're going to sound, because, of course, you're not recording in a studio. You've probably got the air conditioning going on outside the window. You've got colleagues walking up and down the corridor chatting. So all of these things actually is not an ideal recording environment. Yet, nonetheless, if you walked up and down our corridor at any time during term time, you would see a notice up on any colleague's door saying, please don't disturb me, I'm recording. So, let's be realistic about what we are going to be able to do. You are not going to be able to produce a BBC-level production, much as you would like to. And if you're a perfectionist, you will want to. So you've really got to realise that you can only aim for the good and not aim for the perfect. I actually have colleagues who if they stumble, lose their way or whatever, they sort of laugh and say, ha ha, I've lost my way, and they go on. I sort of clutch my brow and think, right, I'm going to press the stop button and start again, and we'll come on to that in a minute. I'd like to think, I hope, that I'm better than I am now than when I started out, but I made a lot of mistakes along the way. And I think, therefore, you've got to accept there may be years as you start going that actually it isn't as good as you would like it to be, but nevertheless it's providing something that, by and large, students want and find helpful. But just to help you keep your feet on the ground, I can remember going around asking students how they'd found listening to this particular lecture that I'd done. And one of them said to me, oh, well, I find it really difficult. Your lectures distract me from Facebook. Now, and this was a complicated area, so there are downsides to this, okay? If the student is in control of their own learning, then they may choose not to engage with it. And even if the machine shows you that they have played it, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have been listening. One of my colleagues, Michaela, who I teach with, reckons that actually quite a lot of the students don't listen to the lectures at all. They rely on my slides instead. Okay? Which I find slightly worrying, but obviously, hey, they don't want to listen to me. The recording's there. So, they may not be listening to everything you say. Don't worry about it. Okay, so how many slides? Now, this is the sort of thing that people get very hot under the collar about, isn't it? Now, actually, I've not given you my usual thing. I would normally, I reckon, in 50 minutes, do 40 detailed slides. Okay, every student is getting one of them, and that's because of the particular course that we do. The course that I'm doing at the moment, I teach baby barristers. It's a national examination. The rough national fail on first sit is around about 35 to 40%. Okay, 35 to 40%. What's more, the results are published nationally. Okay, so I'm going to come up shortly. So I want to make sure when they go into their national exam, which incidentally, for a barrister, you'd expect it to be short answer questions or something, wouldn't you? Not a bit of it. It's 100% multiple choice. Okay, which requires them to have memorized all of the rules in the big rule book and then to be able to apply them in a particular situation. So we've got peculiar needs which we have had to work around to address. So for me, the detailed slide is my way of saying by the time you've done this, you've done all your reading, you've answered the questions I'm giving you, when you pick it up for revision, it will all be there. And we think it's working. How much detail? Well, you can't win, can you? If you're one of these people who are sort of big picture and think, I won't put much detail up there, there will be some students who complain that they had to make 2 notes. Likewise, if you have too many, they will say you're being patronising. Okay, and again, you'll just have to, I'm afraid, learn to live with that. Right, so here is just a typical slide. Now, what I've done there is I've taken the wording of a complicated section and I've broken it down into its constituent bits. And what I've done there is I've put in all of the magic words together with some conceptual stuff. And they get lots of these. Okay. I used to like listening to Letter from America. I'd switch it on and I would just drift off with it as you would go round and round in circles, wouldn't you? And eventually you would end up in the place where you started. Now, for me, having tried it, extempore speaking through a blank screen is something that I can't do. I wish I could do it, but actually I can't. So, remembering that this is a formal presentation for which, of course, the students have paid, I have moved to doing what are effectively radio broadcasts with slides. Which means that, and again, this is just my particular way of doing it, other colleagues will do it different ways, is that I actually have a script. And what that means is that rather than relying, surfing on the moment, I've got to sit down and think about exactly what it is that I want to say, and then think about the nuances of that. How might you do it? Well, you might decide that you're going to tell a story that's going to work its way all through your large group. Or maybe you're going to pose a question, ask them to pause, think about it and say, well, here's how I would have tackled that question. And finally, you might want to lay early things that the wonderful thing actually about not being able to see the audience is that these gentlemen are having a discussion up there. Hi guys, how are you? All right. So I don't have to do that when I'm sat in my room. It's there for posterity. So keep a note of what you said for when you come to re-record. Now, depending on the sort of area that you're in, my particular area changes all the time. The law is always changing. There's a new case. We get a new rule book that comes out every year. The rules change. So I have to be able to cope with the fact that I'm going to be re-recording a lot, and I find that having a script means that I can literally pick the previous script up, make the changes that I want to make, and then with the minimum of fuss, re-record. And I have a way of dealing with that, as you will see. Okay. Now, pretty reasonable question as to how interactive one can be. We encourage our students to pre-read. So the pre-reading should be used as a springboard. It's not unknown for students to be given pre-questions which they have to work up, and then I will start talking about, well, this is how I would have tackled that. If you've given them advanced questions, you can either answer them verbally, or you can give them a link and they can go and download the answers to the particular questions. I'm a big fan, because they are so rule-based and they have to have things word for word, that I ask them to stop and think. I ask them to stop and pause, and I give them reading to go away and do whilst they have paused the recording. And like those old records, you know, where the bell used to ring when you had to turn over the page, it's that sort of thing. I've got a formula to do that. Okay. Now, some practicalities, and I don't claim to be original about this at all. These are all things that I picked up with colleagues. The first thing is I don't number my lectures on the recordings, because with our syllabuses, which are dealt with by the regulator, if they change the order of things in which we deal with them, we have to change the order. So therefore, because Panopto is really not very easy to edit and change, simply avoid numbers. I've got titles for all the large groups, and then the numbers will appear on the course sheet. The second thing is to chunk it up. Now, I do have some colleagues who genuinely seem to be able to speak perfectly for 50 minutes. I just can't manage it. So what I've done now is I have chunked all of my groups up into 4 sections. Okay, chunked up into 4 sections. That means as follows. First of all, you don't have to have such a long attention span. And students seem to like that, you know, bite-sized chunks. Secondly, if the law changes in a particular area and I have to re-record, I've only got to re-record that chunk. Thirdly, and this does happen, if I make a mistake when I'm recording and it's not one that I'm prepared to live with, I can re-record without having to re-record the whole 50 minutes. Okay, so all of those I think are sensible. I have, and this is very, very boring, I have actually standardized the beginning and end of each section. So that all the way through the course lectures, the students will get the same sort of formula of words at the beginning, the same sort of formula of words at the end, so that they know where they are within the whole spectrum. I tend to talk too quickly. Having a script slows me down, so that is probably a good thing. Okay, so I use a decent desk mic. How many times have I forgotten to take the phone off the hook, and the phone goes? So take the phone off the hook, put the sign on the door that says don't under any circumstances disturb me. Hope that your colleagues keep their voice down, and all should be well. I actually record sitting down, because I tend to wander around and I would just be wandering away from the mic, and that would be no good at all. And I have a little setup, so I always just so I know where I am, I always put the mic in the same place, I always put my notes in the same place. I've got the keyboard at the right distance so that I can press the F10 stop button when I need to, so it's all there. And then there is a pause button, so that if you lose your thread and you think it's not irretrievable, you just press pause, find yourself again, pull yourself together again, and then off you go. Okay, so questions?